Well, good morning. Welcome in. SEC Insider Hit this morning is brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. Go with your local agent throughout the state of Mississippi and any of the 82 counties. Bundle your car and home and save. Farm Bureau Insurance, favrates.com, FAVE. Show is also presented by Superior Foundation for all your foundation repairs. Superior.ms. And on National Cheeseburger Day, shout out to Bulldog Burger and their amazing burgers, cheeseburgers, and all the good toppings and condiments that they have. And let's go with the fried pickles at Bulldog Burger, too. We welcome in Steve Robertson after a brutal weekend for the Mississippi State fan base, where they were absolutely dominated and embarrassed by the LSU Tigers. I was not surprised that they lost, but it was the way they lost. And so we welcome in Steve Robertson, 247 Sports, Gene's Page, and the Boneyard Podcast. Steve, I'm going to let you start. No, let's do this. People are beating up on the offense, and we'll get to that in a minute. LSU did whatever they wanted on the Mississippi State defense that's running the same defense. May have a new coordinator, but they're running the same defense with a bunch of super seniors and seniors. How surprised were you that LSU absolutely and totally had their way with the MSUD?
Yeah, I was pretty surprised. And a lot of it, too, Bo, is because you had such success last year against this LSU offense until the defense just wore down in the fourth quarter. You couldn't maintain anything offensively last year. And at some point, the human condition rears its head, but yeah, I think you said it best. I mean, people expected LSU to win this ball game, but it's really more about how they won this ball game. And it was, it was dominated by LSU from start to finish. I mean, you have, one decent drive defensively there where you finally get some pressure on Daniels and get him down. But this kid set an SEC standard for completion percentage. I mean, 30 of 34 in the ball game. For 345 yards, something like that, and a couple touchdowns. And these weren't just checkdowns. I mean, these are intermediate to deep passes, and basically every shot they dialed up, they connected on. And that's the thing that's really frustrating to me. It's like, you expect some growing pains with a new offense, but you had continuity on defense from a player and coaching standpoint, and there's just really no excuse for it. And I think that's why people are so upset. It's not just that they lost. It's how humiliating the loss was.
Steve Robertson on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Mississippi State was dominated 41-14 on Saturday in their home stadium by the LSU Tigers. I would have a competition Tuesday tomorrow. Everybody's job is open, including super seniors and seniors on both sides of the ball. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't think anybody can feel confident about where they stand today. I mean, and again, listen, it's easy to get caught up and be a prisoner at the moment, but you also can say, hey, it is one loss. But the problem with that is offensively, at the very least, you saw some malaise early in that Southeastern game, and you kind of excuse that away and say, okay, it's a new scheme, new team, first time we played an opponent. You took care of business in the second half and won 48-7, right? Well, then you get the good lead. I mean, you get some separation in that ball game against Arizona, and you couldn't put them away. And now all of a sudden you get out here against an SEC opponent, you really couldn't do anything. I mean, you could not do anything. And that 52-yard run that Woody Marks had just before the half was really just kind of a great individual effort. I mean, you get the toss out there and you make it a two-man game, and your two guys actually win the encounter. But outside of that, there weren't a lot of highlights in any respect that you look at and say, you know what, hey, I kind of got a sense of what we're trying to do. I just think there was some play calls, and again, you never know what play is called, but when you're having trouble blocking those guys, to do some of these slow developing, play action rollouts where you roll to the left side and you've got a converted offensive lineman playing tight end against a 4- and 5-star defensive end, that's just not good football. And I think that's the thing that people are so upset about today is the fact that there were just some evidence that State looked underprepared for that ball game and undercoached. They were not ready to play, and that's the thing that really, really concerns people.
Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds Show, brought to you by Bulldog Burger in Ridgeland. Okay, so let's go to the offensive side of the football. It looks like a disaster, quite frankly. Will didn't have any time early. As the game unfolded, they did give him some opportunities, and he couldn't connect, but the game was already out of hand. I think Mike Wright should play more. I think Will and Leach fit, and that's great. And I don't think the Barbay offense and Will fit, and that's not Will's fault, and that's not Barbay's fault. That's just life, Steve. And so I think Mike Wright has to play more. I think if you can make plays at Vanderbilt with nobody around you, and they haven't even believed in getting first downs or scoring the last few years, then you may have a chance to move the football. How do you see it? Should Mike Wright play some more football at quarterback?
Yeah, I think so. And of course, I've been able to watch him some in practice, and and he is not the most skilled passer. But the thing is, I think you give somebody else something else to prepare for, and you make them respect the fact that, you know what, we can bring another guy in that can move the offense. And I thought the mistake you made against Arizona, and I asked Kevin Barbay about this last Monday evening, is every time that he comes in, it's an obvious running down. It's an obvious running situation, and then they never held the linebackers honest. So Arizona's blitzing 6 or 7 every time Mike Wright comes on the field. Well, that's not about Mike Wright's skill set. That's about a poor design, in my estimation. If there's never any threat to pass, why would anybody respect the pass? They're just going to come wide open every single time. And I don't think that's an excuse not to use them. I think he has made some plays. This is the same quarterback that beat Kentucky and Florida last year when he was at Vanderbilt. So to suggest that maybe he can't do it against SEC competition, I think is a little bit silly. But, do I think there's a quarterback controversy? No. Do I agree with booing the team? No, I don't agree with that either. But I think you're underutilizing Mike Wright. That's one of the reasons you signed him. You don't go out and sign a poor quarterback just to let him hold a clipboard.
He won SEC games at Vanderbilt.
Absolutely.
He won them their first game since 2019 last year, Steve. Derek Mason and the offense at Vanderbilt was horrendous. And the guy, like you, I'm a nerd. I went back and watched Mike Wright last year during the summer against Florida, against Kentucky, and one other game that I can't remember. And no, I'm not saying he's Patrick Mahomes, but the kid can play. And, they've got to allow him to actually think it's got a trend towards Mike Wright playing 90% of the time and find situational spots for Will to run air raid concepts. And that's such, opposite stuff that you can work with that and you can move the football. Not this weekend, but I think that's where they're going to have to trend, Steve.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree that it has to skew in that big a direction, but I think you've got to bring in a change of pace guy that holds people accountable. And, Mike is an explosive player, and I think he's being underutilized. And I think most people see it that way, and they're frustrated. And let's be honest about this. The most popular football player in the history of Mississippi State football is a backup quarterback. It doesn't matter what coach is or what the area is. And there always is something, Will Rogers is one of the most accomplished passers in the history of this conference. So there's a place for him in this scheme. I just think you have to run some concepts that lend itself to what he does well. And I don't know that we're really doing that right now. And that was the thing. We had heard some things last week. They were running some air raid, running some tempo in practice. You come out the first snap, it's exactly what you do. You come out there and you hit that little hook, and the next thing you know, it's a first down. The crowd's behind you. Then there was no redeeming value in anything else you ran the rest of that series. And then you punt, and it's a 7-0 ball game. And before you get back on the field offensively, it's 14. Offensively, it's 14-0. That's the thing you look at. There's just some things that we did that were kind of a hint that we maybe had an idea to kind of keep them on their toes, and then we just never executed that.
Okay. So what's realistic in 6 days? It's a winnable game, but I think, South Carolina is favored, and they should be favored. So, we're talking about a lot. A major overhaul may be a little too much, but there's a good bit that they've already started, obviously, practicing and installing because it's Monday. But what's realistic in 6 days as they go to Columbia, South Carolina?
I don't think you have to revamp anything. I just think you've got to make better play calls. I think the foundational standards are there to put together a competitive offense. Number one, you're not going to see a front like LSU's except for maybe one more time this year. But this weekend's a must-win game for Mississippi State. We all talked about at the beginning of the year, September, because of the fact that you had LSU and Alabama. you're probably looking at a 3-2 record at best when you begin to get to the month of September. So you've got to look at this weekend as, hey, this is the Super Bowl. We've got to go out here and do everything we can to win this ball game, because that's going to be really a barometer for the rest of your season. And, Spencer Rattler is not the runner, perhaps, that Jaden Daniels or Delora are,
Yeah,
but you've seen what State's done defensively the last 2 weeks. If you know that you can protect, that's going to open up some of those quarterback runs. And Daniels did a lot of what Delora did. State brings both backers to the A and B gap. They hold up. Daniels and Delora just get loose around the outside. The middle of the field's wide open. So you've got to do some things differently defensively to kind of control that mobile quarterback. But is Spencer Rattler capable of beating Mississippi State? You better believe it.
Yeah.
But I think the game will be decided really on how State attacks that South Carolina defense.
Okay. By the way, I think Rattler's good. His offensive coordinator's not good, and his offensive coordinator last year wasn't good. I was wrong 2 years ago on Rattler. Beamer has yet to hire a good offensive coordinator. Rattler's kind of like some QBs around the country. He has to do everything: fly the plane, sell the concessions, stripe the field, and everything else. I thought he had a hell of a half against Georgia, Steve, and basically was doing it by himself. So I think if Mississippi State people don't think that he's good, and he's got athleticism, Steve, he can hurt you with his legs. He's not Jaden or Delora, but he can rip off a 10 or 15-yard run too. You agree?
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing. It's what happens on third down when you lose containment. You may cover, and that State did that against Arizona and LSU. You're able to cover a little bit. And then he just gets through his second read and says, you know what, the middle of the field's open, I'll go. Rattler is certainly capable of doing that. This guy's a great athlete. But he is a guy that wants to stay in the pocket a little bit more. But he is one of those guys, too, that if you don't get him on the ground, it's going to be a long night.
Okay. Are you surprised with all the super seniors and seniors that the game wasn't competitive from the national anthem on?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially on the offensive line. I mean, listen, I get it. You got a talent differential there, but you've also got, a veteran group that's got a lot of SEC snaps under their belt. I think one of the things the State's got to do is maybe not rotate quite as much on the offensive line. I think you find five and you stick with them and you begin to build some cohesion and chemistry.
Oh, man. I mean, the pure air raid was like Chinese, and so you're trying to flip this thing, and it's just going to take some time. And fans aren't patient, especially this fan base that's used to winning the last 13 years. Would you preach patience to this fan base?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm a little impatient myself, because
Me too.
I don't want to have a repeat of 2018. 2018, you had a potentially national championship caliber defense.
But you don't have those dudes. Yeah, look, this is what I said all offseason. You don't have a dude on defense or offense. You have some nice players. You don't have anything close to Nick Fitzgerald, who is an absolute dude, Montez Sweat, Jeffrey Simmons, Jonathan Abram, Elton Jenkins. You don't have, and those are all, outside of Fitz, but he was a great college player. You don't, the others are bona fide NFL players. You don't have that, Steve.
No, you don't. Yeah, and you get, like you said, you got some nice pieces, but I think when you begin to look at the fact that you have a very experienced team and a favorable schedule, you got to take advantage of that. Period. And what happened Saturday? I mean, that could be an outlier. I think the concern the Bulldog fans have right now is, okay, yeah, we're 3-1 in the Zach Arnett era, but the one may be, kind of indicative of kind of where we are from an experience standpoint as a head coach. And, there's going to be some growing things. And do we need to go make a change? Absolutely not.
No.
And I think, again, you look at it, of course, all it took is one loss for a lot of the people to turn on Arnett, and that's just because of the fact that people want to win. But, Zach's done everything right every step of the way. LSU is probably the one thing you look at and say, you know what? That's the one time that maybe we looked underprepared. But every other step of the way, he's done a good job. I think, the guy deserves some grace, and, we'll get through it. Again, it's just 1 week, but it was a pretty humiliating week.
Okay. When you say Mike Wright should play more, 30%?
Maybe. I think it kind of depends on matchups, too. I think it's kind of dependent on what the defense is showing us. If you've got some opportunities there for the running quarterback, you certainly want to utilize them. But in this day and time, I mean, that's the thing that we're learning. as the game has become more spread out and you've got more athletes on defense, you've got to have a quarterback that people have to account for in the running game. And that doesn't mean you got to run him 25 times a game, but you got to run him enough to keep people honest. And I just don't know it states there right now.
How surprised are you that the defensive line for MSU can't get off blocks?
Yeah, I think, and probably a bigger issue than that, Bo, is, these blitzes aren't getting home. One of the 2 sacks Saturday came on a blitz. Another time, Cromartie just won inside. But, I thought they got a lot of pressure against Arizona. You just couldn't get the lower on the ground. I thought that the LSU offensive line, as shaky as they were against Florida State, was outstanding against Mississippi State. But when you're bringing 6, you got to get home. You can't bring 6 and then leave the middle of the field wide open, which is what happened all day long. And Malik Neighbors, of course, on that little middle and shallow cross there. I mean, there was nobody there to get him. And, what a great day. I mean, probably the only reason that Malik Neighbors won't be named SEC Offensive Player of the Week today is because Jaden Daniels, his teammate, will be.
88% completion. Woo. All right. Well, here's one thing that I know. Your board is nuts on Gene's page. So it's kind of a catch-22 for you. You want a lot of activity and chirping. And you know what I said earlier, Stephen? I said, for so long the Mississippi State fan base was passive. And it showed up in the win and loss and not committed until Cheryl got there. The one thing about people raising hell this week or any week is the stadium was packed. People are spending a ton of money, and they're committed. So as much as some people are like, hey, the fan base needs to settle down, I disagree, because I think pressure and passion drives programs to be really, really Duke basketball, Bama football, Kansas basketball, you know the drill. Do you agree, or how do you see it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think anybody can say anything negative about the fans. I mean, you go back and look at baseball.
Well, they packed the stadium.
How many times did you have, a 10 to 15,000 member crowd for baseball this year? And then all of a sudden you have the stripe out thing, and we've never gotten that right until this past Saturday. You sell out all the tickets. You didn't have a capacity crowd, but you had a really good crowd that was into the ball game until they had a reason not to be in the ball game. So there's no indictment to hand out here to the Mississippi State fans. They're turning out and supporting these athletic programs. And so, but I agree with you. I think, to be apathetic is basically to be uninterested. I mean, people want to win at Mississippi State. They expect to win now. They know they can win here. And as one of our coaches told me a while back, he goes, it is tough to win here at times. It's even tougher to lose. And I don't think that's a reputation Mississippi State fans should shake. I'm not saying you got to go out there and be an idiot on social media.
No, I mean, just
your displeasure is big.
It's okay to be downright ticked off. I mean, that's okay, but you still got to go to the games. I agree with that. Support them. And look, Steve, I've tried to say this over and over and put some emphasis on it. You and I got to know him, and we're very blessed to hang out with him. A Hall of Fame coach died last December. I mean, people they don't want to remember it, but they need to continue to remember. And he was going into year 4 and he was trending the right way. I mean, a Hall of Fame coach passed away last December. And I think sometimes fans lose sight of that.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing about that, to take it to the next level too, is it's like, I understand too, it almost took a Hall of Fame coach, to kind of come out of the doldrums that we had with Moorhead. I mean,
right.
Mullen leaves, and the next thing you go hire Mike Leach, and a lot of people are like, well, maybe he's over the hill, and maybe he was. But the reality of it is that he had State trending in the right direction, and unfortunately now he's gone. And so you don't lose the Hall of Fame coach after a top 20 finish and get better. That's the thing I think sometimes you look at. You're just kind of hoping to maintain because of the experience you have, but it's not a situation where you're going to be able to retool the offense and all of a sudden say, okay, well now we're a contender for the SEC West. It just didn't work that way.
GenesPage.com, the Boneyard Podcast. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
See ya.
Steve joined us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line, and Mississippi State with a tough Saturday against LSU. And I'm reading the text line. No one's calling for Zach Arnett's head. Settle down. Big dog. Again, Zach's made some really good decisions under a very, very difficult time. He did a couple of things. He kept the roster intact and kept the recruiting class intact. And there's some players in that class that are going to help you at some. Isaac Smith played more on Saturday, and Whittemore and some other guys. So that was a big deal, and I think he made some good hires. And I'm not saying that Barbay can't work. I think I'm being critical of the performance on Saturday on both sides of the ball. I'm actually more surprised on defense. It's the same defense. You promoted a coach that's been under Arnett for 3 years. Arnett has his fingers all over the defense. I am beyond surprised. I'm shocked that they were that bad. Am I shocked that Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors could make some plays together? No. Am I shocked? I think, Jason, you heard me. I had it kind of at 31-14. I was talking about it on Friday. But I had a game that was competitive for a while. There's a different...
Right.
But I'll tell you this, this day and age, people aren't going to go watch a team that can't score. I mean, that's why Greg Byrne hired Dan Mullen. He realized that people had enough of scoring, 6 points a game under Sylvester Croom. So, and like I look at young people, my kids included, they want to be entertained and they want to score. And it's just the bottom line.
That's why the air raid was fun to watch. I mean, you never know what's going to happen.
And even though, you're right. And even though it wasn't exactly what people wanted, which again, the expectations were insane. Leach and Will and Makai Polk and, Tulu, among others, did a really good job at times. But the bottom line is when you're spreading it around the field like that, eventually guys are going, the defense you're going against a lot of times is going to get tired. I mean, that's the whole premise. When you read the book, he was like, we're just going to run them and run them and run them and run them. And we believe eventually in the fourth quarter that they're not going to have their legs. And that happened time and time again, whether it was at Texas Tech, Washington State, or Mississippi State. And Leach did it with a bunch of solid to nice to a lot of them lacked athleticism quarterbacks at Texas Tech, Washington State, and Mississippi State outside of Gardner Minshew. And Minshew is an NFL QB. But, the Graham Harrells, the Kingsburys, the Luke Falks, who put up massive numbers, they were not, close to NFL QBs, and that's okay. Nothing wrong with being a good college QB in that system. But he took guys that couldn't do it in other systems, and they could do it in the pure air raid. That's just something to think about. I'm thinking about that it's National Cheeseburger Day. It's brought to you by Bulldog Burger, Lake Harbor in Ridgeland. Ooh, feels good outside. Eat outside. Enjoy yourself at Bulldog Burger.